little faster, Max.
Get ready to fire.
This is not going to end.
Just load.
Have you ever actually seen the kaiju movie?
Warrior!
Well, good morning, Glue Troopers. Today I thought I would talk about painting everybody's favorite kaiju, or at least most people's favorite kaiju, the King of Monsters itself, Godzilla. Now, like a lot of people, I grew up thinking as a kid that Godzilla was green. I'd seen Godzilla in black and white movies, and of course the Aurora box art made everyone paint the thing green. Virtually every kid I knew painted Godzilla green. I didn't build any until I got my Polar Lights kit, but by then I had educated myself to realize that the original costume and the way the creature appeared on screen is actually a black and charcoal gray, at least the original one. Unfortunately, there were a lot of channels for trying to figure out the color guide. There, of course, was the misleading Aurora box art. There was the cartoon series and comic book series where Godzilla usually was green. The black and white films, of course, he looked black and gray. But then as the films became colorized, you started seeing a lot of different shades. Some had a green tint, some had a black or a gray tint. But of course, there's over 50 different iterations of the kaiju. I'm tending to focus on the original one, but what I realized is that painting Godzilla wasn't quite as simple as I thought it was going to be when I first got the kit, which is molded in green. Yeah, natural thought, hey, if a kid builds this, like a kid's going to build a $50 Polar Lights kit, but if a kid builds this and doesn't paint it, it'll look okay on the shelf. And it does, but the simple hard reality is that painting Godzilla isn't quite as simple as it seems. When I got the big Polar Lights kit, which is only two that I've built so far, I built that and I built the one that Phil Separano sent me. Now, a lot of people don't realize that for a while, a lot of the Godzillas that Aurora was putting out were actually in red just because they had a lot of red styrene left over from some other failed projects. And that means you pretty much have to paint the creature, whereas if it was to be minted in a dark gray or green, a kid could sort of get away without doing it. And of course, they put the glow-in-the-dark heads and everything on there later on, which was cool for sales, and that's what they got to do, but it's not technically accurate. Kids were also misled because there were so many different sources. Artwork, comic books, cartoons that had the monster in green. You're watching a black and white film, you're just guessing. Even the photos, behind the scenes photos, were mostly black and white. But then eventually, of course, some colorized photos showed up, and still black and gray. And a lot of kids were like, well, I painted him green, he's staying green. And of course, there's a lot of shading here. When I did my Polar Lights Godzilla, I put the dark gray, covered entirely in dark gray. I used a semi-gloss because I want to give them that wet reptilian look, but sometimes a drier look does look better. Probably if I do another one, I'll do it with a dry look, with a flat look. And then, of course, I used the lighter shades, which are hand mixed in various spots, for the higher ridge lines on all the wrinkles on the body. And actually, using an airbrush, the easiest thing to paint was the white tips on the spikes on the back. But it doesn't look like it at first blush, but there's a lot more nuance to painting Godzilla than you might think, especially if you're trying to do the Shin Godzilla with all the red and everything. And you start realizing that it's difficult just to pick the right color. I mean, there are some very expensive models, pre-made models of the creature that are a color that's a little hard to peg down. Is it a gray or a green or a little bit of both? And how accurate is it? And it doesn't help that with over 50 different iterations of the creature, it is, which one? In some ways, the earliest black and white movies are the easiest ones to do because you kind of figure that black and gray are the colors. But as you start moving into other movies and then again the artwork, and the franchise is so expansive that you kind of go dizzy trying to get it right. And there are people out there who spend a lot of time and effort trying to figure out exactly what's the right color for the iteration that they have. And even these very expensive professionally made display maquettes and everything sometimes have different colors, but I think the manufacturers go through a lot of trouble to try to be screen accurate. So it really gets into a question mark about, okay, which movie is it from? Was the movie in color? And can you find good, proper color palette photos so that you can paint it correctly? When I did mine, I spent a lot of time on the teeth and the inside of the mouth. I would definitely want to have the pink and red and white moist look inside, like the inside of a mouth. A lot of work on the eyes, which I didn't really do that great a job on. In fact, a lot of people will actually bore out where the eyes are at and get small, clear, whatever kind of small, clear, round plastic, clear plastic they can find, and paint the eyes from the inside out and put them in. And those actually look really good when they do it. But you start looking at the details. Some people extend the fangs and everything. And of course, the original movie, they were using a series of suitmation and hand puppets. So a lot of times it sort of morphs around a little bit, different tooth structure and everything. It can get tricky. But what I'm driving at is that if you're going to paint Godzilla, unless it's the original, which you know is pretty much gray and charcoal, depending on which one you get, you've got a lot more of a job ahead of you than it may seem like if you want to detail it out correctly. And the shading is more subtle than you realize. So it's a great, the Polar Lights kit is a great kit. And I like that they numbered all the back plates and gave half moon fittings so they can only go in one. So you're going to get the model. The model's actually fairly easy to build, which is actually not uncommon with a lot of models, fairly easy to construct. The painting is what separates the wheat from the chaff. But the only problem I had with the Polar Lights kit was that given its size, it's really hard to cover up the seams, and I didn't do as good a job as I should have. The next one I'm going to have to be more careful. Of course, the next one, the bottom half is going to be trying to reproduce the first suit. The top half I have other plans for. But painting kaiju, it's a tricky thing to do. The reptilian ones are actually easier. If you start talking about mammals like King Kong, then it really gets hard because you're trying to basically use paint to substitute for hair. But that's a whole nother thing. And it's deceptively difficult to get the fine line between a really outstanding looking model and just an okay looking one. It's just subtle differences. Little human eyes are very capable of picking out things that don't fit or aren't quite right. Your eye kind of goes to the blemish, and the King of the Monsters is definitely something that's iconic. Everyone knows what it looks like. So you can't really get away with much. And, I have found that, making Godzilla look the way I wanted to look has been a little more elusive than I thought. And long way from being little kids who just spray painted the whole thing green and put it on their shelf so that its glow-in-the-dark head could stare at you as you're trying to go to sleep at night and be the last thing you see as you drift off into slumber. Oh, yeah. Nothing like a little 9-year-old nightmare fuel on the shelf. Well, guys, that's all I've got for right now. So tell me, if you've built kaiju, what tricks do you use to get that authentic look? I really do want to know. And take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.